Like, I've been reading all these books for years, and one day my daughter, she was 13 years old at the time, she walked in and she goes, Dad, can you pick me out a book to read? I'm like, what? She goes, yeah, pick me out a book to read. I'm like, why you want me to pick you out a book? She goes, I see all these books you've read. I see how positive you are, and I see the success you're having. And this is a really cool story, if I can share this, Mary Lou. So she comes in, so I pick her out a book. It was a John Gordon book. If anybody knows who he is, John Gordon, he wrote The Energy Bus. That's one of his most famous books, but he's written so many books. And I picked out a book called The Seed. And so, she grabs it, she starts walking out, and she goes, oh, by the way, can you give me a journal too? And I'm like, a journal? I'm like, what are you going to do with a journal? And she goes, well, I want a journal like the first one you ever got, so I can write in it all the places I'm going to go, all the things I'm going to do, and all the people I'm going to help. And Mary Lou, she's 13 years old at the time. So tell me she wasn't hearing what I was saying. She was catching what I was doing.
This is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
Hello, Team PYP. Mary Lou Kaiser here. Welcome to another episode of the Play Your Position podcast. I am so happy that you have decided to join us today because it is Conversation Day here at PYP, and I've got a really incredible human, like I always do, who's going to share his story of becoming a leader, resisting being a leader, writing a book, raising a family, doing all the things that we do in this crazy thing called life. And I know he's going to share with you some insights that you'll be able to use in your life so that you can show up to the people that matter most to you in a way that serves them and in turn yourself. His name is Rob Commodari. Rob, are you ready for kickoff?
I am ready for kickoff. Thank you, Mary Lou.
I am too. So team, here are some things that I know about Rob. First of all, he grew up in a family of 2 parents and 7 siblings, living in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, 745 square foot house in Northeast Baltimore City. He likes to say he's the son of an Italian immigrant and a red-haired German. And money was hard to come by while growing up. So Rob started working young. He was 11 years old when he got a paper route. He delivered newspapers, and he used his earnings to pay his tuition through a private high school and college. He played baseball in college while attending Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton. And after graduating from college, he entered the stockbroker market in Florida. And you know how these things go. One thing led to another. A book called The Greatest Salesman in the World caught his fancy. And after reading it, he was inspired to become a speaker and writer, even though he didn't know that was what he was going to do. Fast forward to today, Rob has a beautiful family all his own. He has a book, which we're going to talk about today, called Better Than You Think. He also has a podcast, which he's going to talk about. And he's somebody who just has done a lot in life, and we can learn so many lessons from people like you, Rob. So I'm excited to have you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you again, Mary Lou. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to share with everybody.
Yeah. Right out of the gate, my first question to you, Rob, is when did you get the call to leadership? When you look back at your life and some of the things I just shared about you when you were younger, do you remember being aware of what a leader was, or was leadership something that came to you later in life? Put us into your story of your relationship to leadership and, how it's influencing what you do today.
Yeah, thank you for asking the question, because it's a very thought-provoking question. Because I can't sit here and say that I ever strove to be a leader or ever felt I was going to be called to be a leader. But thinking about it after you asked the question, I go back to, like, they say more is caught than taught, right? And I remember my dad raising us, and my dad, he worked 3 jobs. He did what he had to do to get things done and make ends meet. And I just remember, if I wanted to go to this Catholic high school that I went to, I was going to pay for it. He told me I was going to pay for it. So it's almost like you have to like lead yourself at some point. So maybe at that early age of 11, I I didn't do it on purpose, but I was leading myself because I had to lead the way. If I wanted to go to that Catholic high school, I had to get out there and work. And I was up at 4:00 every morning, deliver newspapers. Then I go to school, come home, deliver newspapers again, play sports, do homework, knock on doors to collect money. And I guess I got that go-getter thing, watching my dad hustle to, keep us afloat financially. So, and then I guess thinking more about the question of leadership, I played baseball and I was a captain. That's a leader. And I didn't elect to be a captain. I was asked to be a captain. And then, and that was in high school, in college it happened. So, and then you work, you start a job. I had a business and I had to be a leader of my business. I didn't set out to say I'm going to own a business and be a leader. I started a business, and as you work and you add people, you inherently become a leader. Whether you're good or bad, who knows? You become a leader, right? And then I got into the real estate business. It was just me at the beginning, and I hired somebody, and now I have a team, and you again inherit the role as a leader. So I think that's how the journey's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you think of being a leader, Rob, how do you define that role? What constitutes a leader from your point of view?
A few things. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is being the example, right? I think you have to be an example. If you want to stand on a pedestal and beat your chest and say I'm a leader, I don't think that's the right way to go. I think you got to be the example, and I think you have to come from a place of humility. Not thinking you're the best in the world, knowing you always got to learn something, knowing that you're putting others first, thinking of yourself. What they say, there's a difference between what humility is about, thinking about yourself less, not less of yourself. And so I think leadership is coming from a place of humility, gratitude, and being the example.
Yeah. And one thing that I didn't mention about you, but I do know about you from a conversation we had a couple months ago, is that you have been part of a mastermind group for, 11 years now or 12?
11 years. It'll be 11 years, December 31st.
Right. And so, people don't just join mastermind groups for kicks. It was a deliberate decision. And the fact that you've been in that one for that long, talk to us about how working with a very conscientious group of men over the last 11 years has informed some of the decisions you've made as a businessman, and also as the writer that you said you were inspired to become, but didn't know that was where you're going to be. Tell us that story about your book, particularly as it relates to the mastermind group and the power of a mastermind.
I laugh because it was a turning point in our mastermind journey that really affected the book coming to life. So it was myself and three others. We had this mastermind group we started 11 years ago. Since then, one person's fallen off, but so it's three of us right now. So we get together every other Friday for again 11 years, and we were from 6:30 to 8:30 every other Friday. We're either in person or on Zoom, and we go through our wins, our losses over a 2-week period, our gratitude, what things we're learning, maybe what we're struggling with, what we need to fix or work on. And we hold each other accountable. So nobody's here to fix you, but it's like give you encouragement, make some suggestions. But again, we've been doing that for 11 years. And then every Monday, we're on a phone call, quick phone call, half hour. We each get like 7 minutes to talk about what's happened over the past week, and then 3 minutes of feedback from everybody. And we do a mid-year review where we go away for a couple of days to my friend's place in Ocean City, Maryland. And then at the end of the year, we usually go to a place I have up in Deep Creek, which is Western Maryland. And we do a year-end review. And one of the coolest things about the year-end review is we're all obligated to do a 45-minute PowerPoint presentation to show off our year, just to explain our year and what happened. So that's that part of it. So anyway, when we do this year review, it was back in 2016. I had written a goal, because part of this mastermind group, you have to come the January 1st, you have to come with your three big goals for the year. So for 4 straight years, I was coming to the table with writing a book as my big goal for the year. And so it didn't happen in 12, 13, 14, or 15. So now we're in 2016, and we're sitting at the place, Deep Creek, Maryland, and we were going around a table and we're talking about losses. And it was my turn to talk about losses. And I didn't even finish the sentence. And I started to say, as you guys know, I haven't, and I didn't even finish the sentence. And my one friend goes, time out, Rob. He goes, time out. He goes, Rob, and I'm going to say it nicely. He didn't say it this nice. He says, Rob, you're either lying to us or you're full of crap. Now, he used other words.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, holy cow, my friend is calling me a liar in my own house. And I'm like, I'm Italian and it's my house. And if it was a mob, I pull out a gun and I blow them away.
Channeling Goodfellas.
yeah, right. So I'm thinking about all that, but I'm like, oh my gosh, he's right. And I looked at my one friend who was sitting next to him. I'm like, help me out here. And he goes, Rob, you've been saying this for 4 years and you haven't done it yet. And then I looked at the other guy, the other mastermind member, and he just shrugs his shoulders. And I'm like, holy cow. And so from that point, I committed January 1st of 2017 to start writing at 4 a.m. every morning and finish at 5. So I wrote for 1 hour exactly every morning, except for weekends, until I was finished the original manuscript. So it went from January 1st, 2017 to June 23rd, 2017 is when I wrote that last sentence.
Amazing. And tell us the name of the book again and what it's about.
So the title of the book is Better Than You Think. The subtitle is to developing awareness to live a more fulfilling life.
Mm-hmm.
So Mary Lewis, I'm sitting here talking to you. I'm in my home office where this all started. And what happened was I've been reading and studying personal growth since 1990. Probably read about 1,000 books since then. And I remember in 2000, I said, I wrote a goal that I'm going to write a book. So it took me 14 or 19 years to actually accomplish the goal.
Mm-hmm.
But it all started, okay, what can I share? What is it that I can share with people, what I've known? Because a lot of people get information, get knowledge, and they keep it to themselves. And I'm like, I think it's our God-given responsibility. If you're given awareness, you're giving gifts of knowledge, share it with people. And I suffered from the whole imposter syndrome thing that, I'm not good enough, smart enough, or who's going to want to read my stuff.
Right.
And part of it took so long. But anyway, I just prayed about it. And I come from a Catholic background, but I would say I'm extremely spiritual. And I rely and I lean in God and the Holy Spirit and Jesus and all that. But I have several conversations with the Holy Spirit. And so as it started out, Mary Lou, I just wrote, I'll give you the short version. I wrote 16 one-word chapter titles, and I wrote them on this whiteboard. And if we were on video, I could show you this whiteboard. It's really cool because I'm never going to erase it.
No, yeah.
And anyway, so then under each one-word title, I just would write like 3-word or a phrase of a story that I experienced, like using Toastmasters to become a better speaker, my losing my hearing back in, I guess it was when I was 12, 13 years ago, losing $450,000 under humility, passion, the voice inside, going into jail, talking to the inmates. So all these different stories. So as it turns out, there's about 60 stories on this board. And I didn't use them all in the book, but every morning I would get up, I look at the board and I'd like, Holy Spirit, tell me, what am I writing about today? And I close my eyes and think about all these stories, and something was going to resonate with me that morning. And that's what would happen. And then we would write. And to make this long story longer, the title of the book came about like this. So finished the book, 14 edits. It's 2 years after I finished writing the last sentence. And I'm sitting there, the editor, publishers asked me for a title, and I threw like 42 titles at her. And
Wow.
Yeah, and she's the expert at this, and I was giving her that leeway because I don't know what I'm doing, but it's my book. And
right.
So there was always something about a title that she didn't like. And I'm like, all right, this isn't working. And she's like, Rob, if you want that book on November 22nd of 2019, you need to get me a title by such and such a date. So it was really cool, Mary Lou, because I told you I really leaned into the Holy Spirit. I said, you know what? I'm not going with what I went with to write this book. Let me go back to the drawing board. Oh. So I came into this room where I'm sitting right now talking to you. I looked at my board and I said, all right, Holy Spirit, talk to me. Tell me what the title of this book is. Talk to me. And I must have said that like 3 times. Talk to me. And I'm looking at the board, and all of a sudden I had this rush of emotion just overwhelm me. I'm like, holy cow, I'm looking at 60 stories on this board, and like my life is better than I thought it was. And yeah, so I'm not here to tell you your life is better than you thought, or I thought. It's just better than you think. And that's where the title came from.
It's such a great title, because we are better than we think. I mean, thinking someone like yourself who's been immersed in the personal growth space for 32 years knows full well that if you were to basically extract the essence of what growth is all about, personal growth, it is about learning how to think because everything begins with our thoughts. Our thoughts control our feelings, which then dictate what kind of behavior or, or the action that we take or we don't. And that then shapes our lives. So the fact that you have this inspirational title, Better Than You Think, I was drawn to it as someone who loves books and writes books and helps people write books. I was like, wow, that's just a fabulous title. And you have a goal to inspire and impact everyone you meet to fulfill what you call their God-given potential. And clearly you are in touch with awareness, which is really how you and I were connected through a mutual friend, Tommy Breedlove, who for longtime listeners of this podcast know he's been on this show 3 different times and always brings so much light and enthusiasm and joy, and has a tremendous story all his own of moving out of the darkness and into the light, which again, for people who like, oh, that just sounds so religious. Well, call it what you will. It's really part of the human experience. For those of us lucky enough to pay attention and say, I don't want this anymore, whatever this is. For you, growing up with a father that worked 3 jobs in a very small home with a whole bunch of people, you saw what you wanted and you went for it. And that work ethic has served you well, because most people aren't going to get up at 4 a.m. and put an hour in every day to write a book. They're just not. They may talk up a blue streak. Oh, I want to write a book like you were doing for 4 years. Yeah. And it's until we make that decision for whatever it is that we've been saying or kind of dancing around. I think it was, I want to say it was, I don't think it's Joseph Campbell, although that's who's in my mind. The treasure that we seek is in the cave. And I'm butchering it, but you have to go into the cave to get the treasure. There's no other way. And going into the cave is scary.
You're right. You have to uncover it. And if I could just add one more thing about the book. So it's not just a book about Rob's stories and Rob's life. And that's what you get a lot of. But it's really like the reason I want people to think that their life may be better than they think it is, or life is better than they think it is I want some of my stories to resonate with them to a similar story that they didn't dig the lesson out of. And now they can say, oh my God, that's what I should have learned from that. And now that's what I get from that. And what can I do with that going forward? So it's just not about Rob. It's what you can get out of the stories of your own life.
Right. Which is what a good storyteller is able to do. A good storyteller will tell a story about maybe themselves or people they know, but the audience can put themselves in that story and walk away with a new insight. That's the beauty of what you've created.
And that was the hope. Yeah.
Right. That was the hope. I mean, you're a reader. You were influenced by a book, The Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino, which has been around forever. Been the last, 50 years or something. It's a staple in any entrepreneur's or business person's library. It has to be, because that stuff, what he talks about is timeless.
Yes.
Despite the changes in technology and the way that we interact with each other, at the end of the day, we're still human beings, and we're seeking connection, and we're seeking guidance from those who have walked a path like ours, or maybe not like ours, and have struggled and also have won along the way, just like any football team or any baseball team or any team at all. The path is sometimes glorious and other times it's agonizing. And I would love for you to share a time in your life, Rob, when it wasn't as, you're in a really good space right now, and you've worked hard to build your life to be what it is today. What is one of your stories of struggle that you could share with listeners? And what was the lesson that you took from that time?
Well, I'm looking at the board in front of me, and I just think I know there's a couple of things that stand out. But I remember when I was, I guess it was 1999, 94 through 99. I was delivering newspapers, but I was also working at T. Rowe Price. I worked at T. Rowe Price from 91 to 94 and did the newspapers through 2003. But so in that time, I was saving. I didn't have a lot of money, but I was saving a few dollars here and there, and I was buying 10 shares of this stock, 15 shares of that stock, right? And then 98, 99 was a dot-com thing. And, you could throw a dart at a dartboard blindfold and you hit the bullseye. But, I was a 33-year-old kid or guy and I had a net worth, I remember that, of like $750,000.
Wow.
And I'm like, this is great. And coming from where I came from, this is great. And I never forget it. I can remember it was like yesterday. It was in like March of 2000. My wife and I are driving down. I can tell you what road it was on. And I remember saying to her, I said, honey, we're doing pretty well right now. The way we live, we could go the next 11, 12 years without working and we'd be okay. But I'm going to keep working. We're young yet, but I feel really good about where we are. And then over the period of the next month, I had I had a Morgan Stanley account that was worth like $450,000 and it went to zero. Well, I'm sorry.
Oh.
It was 380. It was 380. It went to zero. And I made a $70,000 investment in a private placement that went up, went belly up. So it was $450,000 that I had lost in a period of a month. And listeners out there might be saying he didn't lose it. He never had it. It was in the bank. It was value. And I got greedy and I just thought I knew better than everybody else. And I'll never forget, I was playing the margin game. Everybody knows what that is. So I was leveraging the value I had in my portfolio to buy more stock. And I was scoring big. And when it starts going down in your own margin, you start getting these things called margin calls. And I was getting a phone call from the brokerage company every day. You need to sell more shares. You need to sell. You need to sell. You need to sell. And it was gut wrenching. And I'll never forget, I pulled in my driveway. It was the end of March. My wife, we had a 6-month-old baby. And I got a call from T. Rowe Price, says you need to sell your last shares of this. It was like 70 shares of, 300 shares of T. Rowe Price stock at $70. So it was like $21,000 worth of stock. And it was all I had left except for the equity in our home and some retirement money. And I had to sell it. And so everything was zero. And I had to go in and tell my wife what happened. And it was gut wrenching. And I remember telling her, she was changing my son's diaper. And I told her, and I was expecting to get kicked out of the house.
Oh, wow.
And she looked at me. She goes, honey, I trust you. She goes, I know you'll be back. And I said, wow. And I said, I got two choices. I can either stick my head in the sand like an ostrich or I can come out fighting. I think you know what I'm going to do. And so it was a hard time. It was a very hard time. It was a very humbling moment in my life. And you live and you learn, right?
You absolutely do.
It's halftime here at the Play Your Position podcast, and we've got ourselves a great game. While you're up grabbing another snack and topping off your favorite beverage, make sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss another play. PYP is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever great podcasts can be found. Now, let's get back to the game.
It's moments like that where you really, I think, do learn what you're capable of or not. And you made the right choice to go at it swinging, right? Instead of running away. A lesser person would have just shrugged and said, oh, well, right? And you said, nope, not on my watch. And there's certain forces in the world that are beyond our control. But at the end of the day, I think, I don't know if you agree with this or not. I subscribe to the philosophy that we are 100% responsible for our lives. Everything that happens in our life is for us, whether it's good or bad. And we sometimes learn best when things don't go according to plan. So thank you for sharing that. Again, as a former athlete and sports fan, that you watch these teams and none of these players are sitting around imagining, well, maybe we won't win. They're all doing the work to visualize and manifest and believe. In fact, I just had a conversation this morning with a woman who used to be a part of the Jets, the New York Jets organization. And it was in the days when Rex Ryan was coaching and they were having a good year. This was a while ago. And long story short, they made it to the AFC playoffs, which whoever won that was going to go on to the Super Bowl. And she said, in my bones, Mary Lou, in my bones, I believed that everything was aligned and we were going to get there, and they lost. And, it was devastating because all of us humans who believe in the power of belief and imagining what it is you want and setting a goal and going for it, sometimes you can do all that work and it still doesn't come to fruition. So what did you do after that tremendous financial setback, Rob? Where did that lead you next?
Well, first of all, you said something before I thought was profound, and I don't know if everybody heard it or not, because you said something about the philosophy of everything happens for you. Because some people, why is this happening to me?
Right.
And look, I've had many struggles since then, and every time I have a struggle, a challenge, or what is perceived as a bad experience, I'll ask the question, God, what are you doing for me here? What are you doing for me? And try to figure out that answer is, and you might not get that answer right away. So to answer your question about what I did, I mean, I put my nose to the grind. I knew what got me where I was. I can't sit here and say I was going to go right back into the stock market and invest and do all that again. But I knew I had to work hard and save money. And so I started. I would work. I would save money. I bought real estate. I bought a couple houses fixed up and sold, and the newspaper business was doing really good for me, and I just started saving. The next thing you know, I'm back and some. And it's just about focusing on the good, focusing on what you are capable of doing, and focusing on helping others, and things will come your way. It's like the whole idea of you do the activities and just trust the results will come. You just can't control those results.
Right. That you can only control how you respond to things that happen. And that isn't easy. I'm not going to sit here and, and say that when things happen for us that we just go, oh, yay, especially when things are emotionally difficult. And
it takes a level of resilience. Is the word.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It really, really does. Now, you are podcasting. Tell us about your show, what it's called, and what you talk about with the guests that you bring on, and why it matters.
That's another story. So, I meditate and I pray just about every day. And there was about 15 years or so ago, I met this guy at a conference, and he said to me, Rob, you will go to the next level in your life and in your business when you start trusting that voice inside of you. And so about 3 or 4, 6 months later, whatever it was, I was asked to speak at a prison. And I was going to do a speech for this group there was a Toastmasters group in prison. And for people who don't know what Toastmasters is, it's basically a public speaking forum where you learn to become a better speaker, and I'd say a better listener as well. Anyway, so she asked me to do a presentation for these inmates who were getting out in the next 1 month to 4 years. And I didn't want to just give them any old speech. I wanted to give them a message of hope. So I was doodling, wasn't paying attention in another meeting one time, and I just wrote this word jailbreak on a napkin. And I got fired up. I'm like, I'm going to do a speech in prison, and I'm going to call it jailbreak. This is the greatest thing ever, right? And then I'm like, wait a minute, maybe not such a good idea, right? And so I remember what the guy said to me, trust that voice inside of you. And I'm like, the voice told me to go with jailbreak. So I went with jailbreak. It was a phenomenal experience. That's another podcast in and of itself. And it was a whole spiritual experience for me. So fast forward to March of 2021, I was sitting in my chair and I was meditating and I was praying. And previous to that, 3 straight days, 2 of the days I gave presentations. The third day I was listening to a presentation. And in those presentations that I gave, twice I said, hey, I'm not the end all, do all, say all. I'm just a work in progress. And then the one I heard, the lady said the same thing. She goes, look, I'm not the judge, jury here, but I'm just a work in progress. So I heard that phrase 3 times in 3 days. And then I'm sitting here praying and meditating. And all of a sudden, I just got this urge. I got this urge up my body, my chest. And I saw this vision of a half-chiseled statue. And I kept hearing the word, you're a work in progress, you're a work in progress. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, God, if you're asking me to do a podcast here, I've never done that before, but I feel like you're telling me to do a podcast. Call it Chiseled, because we're all a work in progress. And you want me to share the stories of others. And I'm like having a conversation with God. I'm like, all right, I'll make a deal with you, God. You bring me the people and I'll do the podcast. Right? So it's been a joy and a pleasure. I feel like I'm like in my element, just talking to people and having them share their stories, share the stories of their, like whether it's a redemptive story, whether it's a big achievement, or something where they learn something really valuable. It's been amazing. And, at first, like I said, I thought I was supposed to be just a conduit for others to share their stories. And then somewhere along the way, I figured that not only am I supposed to do that, but I'm supposed to continue getting chiseled in the process, and I'm supposed to get better and better for him, for God's use. So that's what it's about.
Oh, it's fantastic. Well, I'll put a link to your podcast and certainly your book as well on your show notes page here at pyppodcast.com. I'm curious, you've been talking to lots of people, really your whole life. I mean, as a boy, if you're out delivering newspapers and you have to go knock on doors to collect, you're engaging in conversation here and there. And when you look around the world today, Rob, what do you see is one of the biggest challenges, that D line that is stopping people from really making the kind of forward progress that is possible, but they're just not doing? What's stopping, what's challenging people today?
Man, that's a good question. I'm sitting here thinking, you said D line. What did you mean by D line?
In football, when you're up against, you're in that defensive line is lined up to prevent you from getting into the end zone.
Yeah, I thought that's what you meant. So it's the resistance, right? So that defensive line is resistance. And so what's the resistance people are facing today? That's what I'm thinking about when you ask the question. And, some of the challenges are this, people like I'm a born introvert. I've had to coach myself to get out there and talk to people because I could sit in the corner and read a book and be totally fine. Mm-hmm. But so I think that the resistance of getting out there face to face with people, because technology, let's face it, technology has made it easy for people to just to text and not get engaged in a face to face, voice to voice conversation. And I think that's one issue. I think the other issue is all the negativity that people capture in whether it's social media and the news and whatnot. And I think the world suffers from an epidemic of low self-esteem. I truly believe that. And what can I do to help one person at a time, build their level of self-worth up, one day at a time, one day at a time, one event at a time, one conversation at a time. And I believe that's probably the biggest wall, obstacle, or challenge that our generation faces today.
Yeah, I think that's well said. The world suffers from low self-esteem. Oh, no one's ever said it that way before. And and yet good things are happening in the world, right? I mean, look what you're up to, and you have children, and you have a grandchild, and you work with people who have goals and want to do good in the world, and yet there is that pervasive. It's almost the toxicity of negativity is, for me, feels like it's an all-time high. And those of us who choose not to engage with it that's a part of our battle, isn't it?
Yes.
We know yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like when, I remember I said earlier, more's caught than taught, and I watched my dad do what he did. And so I became, let's call it a workaholic to some extent. But you be the example. So then, like, I've been reading all these books for years. And one day my daughter, she was 13 years old at the time, she walked in and she goes, "Dad, can you pick me out a book to read?" I'm like, "What?" She goes, "Yeah, pick me out a book to read." I'm like, "Why do you want me to pick you out a book?" She goes, "I see all these books you've read. I see how positive you are. And I see the success you're having." And this is a really cool story, if I can share this, Mary Lou.
Please do. Yeah.
So she comes in. So I pick her out a book. It was a John Gordon book. If anybody knows who he is, John Gordon, he wrote The Energy Bus. That's one of his most famous books, but he's written so many books. And I picked out a book called The Seed. And so, she gradually starts walking out, and she goes, "Oh, by the way, can you give me a journal too?" And I'm like, "A journal?" I'm like, "What are you going to do with a journal?" And she goes, "Well, I want a journal like the first one you ever got, so I can write in it all the places I'm going to go, all the things I'm going to do, and all the people I'm going to have." And Mary Lou, she's 13 years old at the time. So tell me she wasn't hearing what I was saying. She was catching what I was doing.
Yeah, yeah.
And then she reads, over the period of the next 5-6 months, whatever it was, she read 7 John Gordon books, right?
Wow.
And then it was a fall, and she's playing soccer. And I love the story. I get emotional sometimes when I tell it and think about it. So she's playing soccer. It's a tournament. They win the first game. They have to win the second game to go into the championship. No ties. So the game ends in a tie and they go into penalty kicks. And so if you're familiar with that, you get 5 people on each team. One team gets one, the next, back and forth. And after 5 shots, whoever's got the most goals wins. So my daughter was the 4th shooter on our team. We're up 2-1, and she's the 2nd shooter, so the bottom half. So if she scores a goal on her shot, we win. The 5th person doesn't even have to go. So she sits the ball down nice and casually and confidently on the 12-yard line, takes her step back, kicks the ball, scores the goal, right? So I can sit here and say, hey, I'm proud dad, my daughter scored the winning goal, but I wasn't even thinking that. I wanted to know what was going on in her mind when she did that. So after the game, we walk on the field, I put my arm around her, and I said, hey, were you nervous when you get ready to take that shot? And she goes, no, not at all. And I said, what were you thinking? And she goes,
Oh my gosh.
She goes, I was thinking about all the books you had me read.
Oh.
And it's like, I was like, unbelievable. I said, I was so filled with joy in that moment that my daughter at 14 now was able to sit there, read, and have the awareness to think about this stuff as she's getting ready to take a penalty shot to win the game. And that's amazing to me. It's amazing to me. And that's what this world needs more of. For us adults to be examples to our kids in a good, positive way. That's what we need.
Yeah, it is. It is. And thank you for sharing a story that powerful and meaningful to you. It got me emotional. As a parent, I understand those when you see your child do something or they tell you something and you realize, and it's not so much that it's like we're seeking validation. It's just that I think as parents, most of the time we're like, I don't even know if I'm doing this right because there really isn't a blueprint. I had great parents. I really did get the lottery. I was a multi-million-dollar winner in the lottery with my parents. And I know not everybody had that. And there are lots of people today that don't have that. But that doesn't mean that you can't find people who can be that positive, reinforcing messenger, whether it's on a podcast like this or in a book or just out in the community. It's going back to what you started with today, is having the awareness that something isn't working and there is something better. That life can be better than you think, right?
I believe that.
Bring that back to your book again. It really can. It comes down to making a decision to show up the best you can every single day, knowing full well that sometimes you're not going to get it right because we're human. But that doesn't mean that that's the end of it. It just means, oh, today wasn't a great day. Tomorrow will be better. I can start over.
Yeah, I heard it said one time, embrace the suck. Right? Sometimes our days suck. Sometimes the challenges are hard. Sometimes the experiences are tough. But you got to embrace that. And the one thing I've learned too is like there's some of us that want to start things. We're either entrepreneurs or we're pioneers and we want to get out in front and do things, and we're afraid to start things, and we suffer from paralysis by analysis. But it's said that anytime you start something for the first time, you are going to suck. And you're going to get better from there. And so that's like, we got to get like ourselves and children and other generations, get them through the challenge or the hump of that first few times of trying something, and let them know you are going to fail. You are not going to sound real good. You are going to fall. You are going to stumble, but you keep moving forward. And that's where fulfillment comes in and joy comes in when you have those moments of saying, man, I overcame this and look where I'm at.
Yeah. Yeah. And thankful. I think that's something that it's a trend I'm seeing in social media over the last, 2 or 3 years, of more people embracing the less than perfect posts. Some people go overboard with their sob story of I used to be like this and now I'm like, but it's counter to the highlight reel that was pervasive for many years in the early days of social media when it was really coming up in the early 20 teens, and everybody was highly, and some people still highly filter but I'm seeing more people, it may just be a reflection of who I follow, But I think in general, these platforms have been around long enough that people have caught on and saying, you know
Yes.
what, this is a bunch of BS. Nobody's that perfect all the time. Let's see some the real stuff. And it's okay to be positive. I mean, I tend to show up more positive than negative, but every now and then I'll put something out there that is more vulnerable, or, this is hard for me to say, or, I just on Sunday just celebrated or acknowledged the 1-year anniversary of my dad dying. And, and people responded to that. And that isn't something that I was jumping around. I mean, I cried a lot that day. I was feeling both really grateful for the life I got to enjoy with my dad. And I was also feeling sorrowful because I'm like, you should still be here, right?
Yeah.
But this is life, right? And technology has, for so many people, given a false illusion of things happen really much faster than they do in real time. And that you have to be perfect in order to play. And that's where imposter syndrome comes in.
Yeah.
We're always comparing, like, oh, so-and-so, look at so-and-so, whoever so-and-so is. We all have those people that we follow or admire and think, oh, to be like that. And I think one of the things that's really valuable about the content that you create, Rob, through your book and your podcast and the work you do in real estate, and certainly your community, is you do show up with a positive attitude, but also you're a realist. You know that not everything is going to go according to plan.
I tell people I'm an optimistic realist.
Right. I love that. That's great.
That's the line I use.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of you and all the things that you do, where do you hang out online? Where could people learn more about you, listen to your show? Are you active on any social channels? Where might people connect with you?
Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. I'm kind of a newbie to Instagram, so I don't have a huge following. So I'm working on that. But those are the three main places. In fact, I went to a TikTok class today.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Why?
I just was curious. I've never done a TikTok. Now I've done a few with my daughter. She'd reel me in. Hey, Dad, do a TikTok with me, and you do a dance or a song or something. But I've never done a TikTok for business or anything like that. So I went to a class today. But yeah, so LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, I tell you, are the three. And then the Chiseled podcast. It's on all podcast apps: Spotify, Apple, any Anchor. It's on those, and it's called Chiseled again.
Yeah, Chiseled, right. I'll have a link to that. I'm curious. So you have 3 children. Do you ever have conversations with them about how they're consuming social media or just using technology? I'm curious what kinds of things that they have to say, having grown up with it in a way you and I did not.
Well, it's funny. Like I have an older daughter she's not there as far as that goes, because it's like the younger generation. I have a 38-year-old daughter, so she's like in our world, right? But like I have a 23-year-old and 21. She'll be 21 in another month or so. So it's funny. They're on the phone and you see them, texting away. And I'm like, hey, did you talk to so-and-so today? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, did you talk to them or did you text them? And no, I texted. I'm like, you didn't talk to them then? It's the same thing, Dad. I'm like, no, it's not. So it's funny how in today's world, they take the technology and they believe that texting is communicating like with a dialogue, and it's not. And so you take that into business, and I have a team. I have a couple young realtors, and it's not just to my team. It's around the globe, and that younger generation would rather text and try to communicate that way instead of having a human-to-human, voice-to-voice conversation where you really build a relationship. So I think that technology hurts in that sense of the word.
It will be interesting to see what the fallout, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but just what are the consequences of texting first as far as communication goes, and how that's going to shape the way relationships are formed and nurtured and grown. It is not our paradigm, because that's not the world we grew up in. And just like the world we grew up in was not the same world our parents grew up in. And there were things that they saw us dealing with or interacting with, and we'd be like, "It's just how it is today, guys." They're like,
Right.
yeah, right. So there is that changing of the guard, so to speak.
Yeah. But Mary Lou, could you imagine 30 years from now, the presidents of several nations having their conferences or communicating, and hey, did you talk to President so-and-so of this country today? No, I texted him. Can you imagine that? I mean, how that's crazy.
That may be where we're headed, though.
It may be. It's a crazy thought, but it may be.
Everybody, what is it? That World Economic Forum? They all go over there. Where is that? I want to say David, but that's not right. It's somewhere in Stockholm. It's Sweden or the Netherlands.
And is it Sweden? I think it is Sweden.
Yeah, and they're all gathered, and nobody talks. They're just all on their phones texting.
Yeah.
Sending memes back and forth.
Yeah, probably about memes about one of the other presidents.
Exactly. Oh, man. Well, listen, Rob, this has been a lot of fun. Before we wrap things up, would you be willing to share a couple of books from your vast library that you could recommend to listeners? I know you mentioned the John Gordon suite of books. What's a book or two that has been a go-to for you, either recently or just over the years?
Well, my number one all-time favorite book, aside from the Bible, of course, I'll throw that in there, but the number one favorite book that really changed the trajectory of my life was The Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino. He was my first mentor, and I will highly recommend that to anybody. That's a business and a life book. So
yes.
the Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino. And then there's been several books. I'm sitting in my home office right now looking at about 1,000 books here.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
So there's this one, you spoke about leadership today. There's this book, it's called Virtuous Leadership. Virtuous Leadership. That had a huge impact on me. And anybody who wants to be a leader, a virtuous leader, I would pick that book up in a heartbeat.
Okay.
And
cool.
Then, it's a cool book that I've read. I read it 5 times last year, and it's really a business book. But it's called Never Split the Difference. Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. And it's about negotiating. And keep in mind, we're always negotiating. We're negotiating whether it's a business deal or whether it's a conversation in your own head or you're negotiating with God. Who knows, right?
Right.
We're always negotiating with our kids, our spouse, our partners. And so it's just a way to understand how to communicate with people. And I really enjoyed listening. I'm reading that book. I don't own that book. I know of it, so I'm going to add it to my cart and bring that into my library. So appreciate those 3: Virtuous Leadership, The Greatest Salesman in the World, Never Split the Difference, and of course the Bible, which for many people is a very, very important part of their life. So great recommendations, Rob, and wonderful, wonderful conversation today. You uplifted me, and I know will have uplifted listeners with your what did you call yourself? Your optimistic realism. Yeah. There you go.
And your work ethic. It's good to hear that it is possible to succeed through putting your nose to the grindstone and not letting setbacks take you out of the game. You get up, you say, I got to run different plays, and tomorrow's another day. And
sometimes you got to call an audible, right?
Oh, yeah, you do. More than once.
Analogy, right?
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. Well, thank you again. I wish you all the best as you continue on your journey, Rob, and being a part of the Player Position podcast MVP group is an honor for me.
Well, thank you very much. It was an honor to be on here, and I had a great time with the conversation with you.
Hey team, Mary Lou here. Who's number one in football changes from year to year. Fashion trends come and go, same with musical tastes. But leadership skills, they never go out of style. In fact, these days, leadership is an essential survival skill for a world that demands more from us than ever before. To succeed these days, you need to know how to show up for yourself so that you can then do the work you love with people you like the way you want. The Player Position Leadership Playbook helps you do this, and it's free. Go to pyppodcast.com to download your copy today. If being more successful this year, next year, in the 21st century is on your to-do list, get your copy of the Play Your Position Leadership Playbook now. pyppodcast.com. It's at the top of the page. You can't miss it. That's pyppodcast.com, and start being more of the leader you are meant to be today. This podcast was produced by Daniel Romeros. Show notes for this episode can be found over at pyppodcast.com. I'm Mary Lou Kaiser. Thanks for listening.
Here at the Play Your Position podcast, we believe that the road to self-mastery and a life well lived starts with answering the call to leadership. That's when the fun really begins. Send this episode to any friends who might need to hear the inspiration and ideas you heard today. And feel free to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform.